Welcome to How to Become a Production SQL Database Administrator. My name is Raphael. Continuing with the performance theme, we are now going to look at another tool that allows the DBA to monitor performance about the SQL Server. And those are Dynamic Management Views, or DMVs. So as I mentioned, another tool at your disposal to measure performance and view details about the SQL Server is the DMV. DMVs and DMV functions return server state information that can be used to monitor the health of the server instance, diagnose problems, and tune performance. There are a tremendous amount of DMVs, so we're not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to give you a list where you can do your own research. DMVs, actually, there are two types of DMVs, if you will. There are DMVs, which are database management views, and database and DMFs, which are database management functions. Both are either server scoped, which means that they look at the state of the entire server, or they are database scoped, which means that the DMV or DMF is specific to that database that you're inquiring about. One thing to note, while DMVs can be used like the select statement, meaning it's used with a select statement, the DMF requires a parameter. So just note that. So if you run a DMV and you get an error saying parameter not accepted or need one, then obviously it's a DMF. Some, as I said, apply to this entire server and are stored in the master database, while others are stored in each database specifically. Currently, there are a little over 200 DMVs. So as I said, there's a tremendous amount of DMVs to look at, and these help us a great deal. These are basically scripts or views that allow us to generate a result set against the database that we're inquiring about or the server itself. The DMVs actually are broken down into the following categories. So this makes a utilization of DMVs easier. And obviously, as you can see, these are the categories that they're related to. So if your inquiry is about a database related, then obviously you're going to use a database or DMV that's related to database. If you have questions about indexing, then obviously you'll use the necessary DMVs and DMFs against for the indexes and so on. So these are the categories, and I'll show you in a second website where you can access this. So these are the primary categories where all the DMVs are separated. Actually, the DMV site, to make it a little easier, if you copy this and go to your browser and paste it, you'll get to this page right here, the Microsoft page. And as you can see, this will have the list of all the DMVs. And to get the list of the DMVs, actually, you can just run this script select statement, which I'll show you in a second. One thing to note, as I mentioned, is that they're categorized. The DMVs are categorized by groups. So to look at those specific groups, for example, if you wanted to look at index-related dynamic management views and functions, just click on it. And this is obviously the group, and they will tell you those specific DMVs that are related to that. And then if you actually click on the DMV itself, it'll give you a tremendous amount of information about that DMV specifically, and I encourage you to learn that. Now, don't go start learning on every single DMV because there's too many and you won't use them. Most likely you'll use about 10, as most DBAs use. The benefit, obviously, is that at least you have a list of the DMVs, and now when you're trying to figure out a problem or fine-tune a specific thing about the database or the server, you can go to that category, if you will, and then navigate even further down. So let's look at that now. So let me just quickly go back to the SQL Server, and we'll start looking at DMVs. So what I've done for you, obviously, is just write you this quick script to view all the DMVs. Just copy this and execute it, and you'll get a list. Now, obviously, these DMV resides in the system objects. If I just execute that, you'll see there's about over 2,000 rows, but we want to navigate to the DMVs, and we're using a where clause. So when you execute this, you get only the DMVs, and there they are. Obviously, just note the type V references DMVs, and IF represents the function. And I've just quickly given you a select statement for all of them. Notice that all DMVs start with sysdmv. So just take a note of that if you're trying to write a specific select statement and you forget to write the sys, because sometimes they just show you the DMVs like this and not highlighting the sys. the sys schema must be present in order to be executed. So if you see an error, that's most likely what you're doing. So I've just given you a quick select statement for all of them. As I said, there's 200 of them, so if you start executing them, you can get ideas of what they represent. And I'm not going to go to every one of them. As you can see, there's a tremendous amount of result sets and columns for virtually each DMV. I am going to go over a few of them just to give you an idea of what we're looking for. So those are the 200 for you, so it's a very easy thing to look at. Now, so let's start looking at DMVs, specific ones, and see what the results are, and then we can just navigate through the results. This one, DMV list all empty tables. Now, obviously, I'm using this because you can use DMVs with joins also. So this obviously gives you a list of all the empty tables in your database. So in this particular database, 2012, these are the corresponding tables that have no records. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean you drop them because they can be important things, but it'll give you an idea of how to use a DMV. DMVs are obviously a tremendous help in determining performance because they can be used for indexes, slow-running queries, missing indexing, statistics, counters, CPU usage, memory. Let me correct that, memory. Oops. And so on. So the point is there's a tremendous amount of DMVs and information that can be utilized in trying to execute the performance and trying to figure out what is causing performance issues. So this is another way. Now, these are some of the simple ones that you most likely be using in, for example, using this one, select all from sys execution connections. It obviously points out what connections are connected to your current server. So this is a good thing to know about what SPIDs are connected to your SQL Server. And again, I encourage you to go through these things. One of the benefits I like about this one, since this is local, you will get the network IP address here if there's an outside source connected to your SQL Server. So this is a great way of knowing which machines and their IP addresses are connected to your server. Regarding some sessions, obviously, we're looking at the sessions against the SPIDs and determining the status of them, whether they're sleeping or waiting and so on. So this gives you another idea of running. Requests, obviously. This is an important one also to know. We want to know how many requests are coming into the SQL so we can diagnose performance here. If there's a tremendous amount of requests, obviously, then CPU saturation can become a factor. So we want to look at that. And again, I encourage you to go through there because it does provide you with the CPU time and so on. Index stacks. This is a very important one when we're looking at indexing. We want to know this primarily indicates which index, and I'll be going into it deeper in a second. Well, it shows you which indexes are being utilized and which indexes are not being utilized. So you can obviously deploy your index strategy even better. This will give you the index missing stats, if there are any. And this one's a great one also. We talked about the performance counters, and then you have to look through them one by one. This will give you an exact counter name and counter object. And obviously, you can obviously copy this to your Excel sheet and keep a record of it. So these are all the counter names that are associated with SQL, and so on. So let's continue using a few other things. Here's a couple of joins with the DMVs. So it allows you to identify where the bulk of the connections are originating. So as I mentioned, if you highlight this and execute this, this again gives you that particular information into the IP address. So this is a great one that I have used previously that I do have. Who are directly connected to your SQL instances. That's an important thing to understand for security reasons. We want to know who's connected and what their text they're executing their text against. So this is an important one also. If I go here, find indexes. Now, obviously, I'm trying to, as I mentioned, there are over 200 DMVs, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'm going to go over a couple of them that are relevant to us, to our subject. We've already discussed indexes, so this may be an important DMV to understand, and that's the index usage stat. This is a very important one, actually, when we're talking about indexes. It finds indexes and their database names. So there's the object name, there's the index name, and it talks about the specific databases that are indexed. Another one, obviously, in index strategy is to finding out which indexes are useful. As I've mentioned in the index strategy, it's one thing to index something, but if the index is not being utilized, then it's pointless. That this particular DMV will show you the object name that is indexed on. And these are the important things we're looking for. User seeks. How many times has the user applied that index? How many times has it read? How many times is it write using this index? If these are really narrow and there's only 2 reads and 2 scans, obviously, and hardly any seeks, then this particular index may be a case for dropping the index. This will give you important index of the usage. If you don't find the index being utilized, then again, you have to drop it. Again, this will give you the unused index category right here. So again, these are you can see the 174, you can use the table name here, and you can see the name of the index. Now, these indexes have not been utilized. This in conjunction with this will give you an idea of which indexes are being utilized and which not, and then you can start dropping these indexes after some investigation. So this is a great benefit of using DMVs. So this is the prime purpose of DMV, is to give you information rather than going through the GUI front end, if you will. And as I mentioned, there's a tremendous amount of data here that you can go through. And again, I'll be talking about specific DMVs when we talk about specific subject. And what I mean by that is when we talk about database mirroring in the 3rd and final course of this series, then obviously we may look at some DMV related to database mirroring. And right now it's pointless because we haven't even discussed database mirroring. But if I click on that, it'll give me information as to what DMV we can use against database mirroring. And as you can see, there's database mirroring connections. So it'll show you the information about the database mirroring environment. So that's the great benefit of the thing. I don't have to go through the GUIs, and there's a tremendous amount of information. And once you become more familiar with each of these DMVs, you'll obviously navigate to only creating your own DMVs and navigating to only those specific columns. For example, if you talk about the connections here, I've got this select star, and I've mentioned many times before that this is poor practice. We want to filter this as much as we can to the actual data that we want. So maybe we just want the session ID, the connection state, protocol version or protocol type and whatever, and then you would obviously certainly the client network address and so on. So you would write the script that is suits your need rather than using asterisks. But again, this gives you an idea of how to utilize DMVs, and it's a great tool that I do use and you should be familiar with, and that's the reason I'm mentioning it here. So I've given the user thing. I would basically go through a few of these, not necessarily all of them, but it's a great tool to have an understanding of how the DMV works. There's a tremendous amount of literature out there on DMVs. I would highly encourage you to read that also. I have read the book. I can't remember by whom, but he goes through all these DMVs one by one virtually, or by categories, I should say, and he has a great explanation for it, but I can't remember the book where I got this from. So kudos to him. So anyway, this is an introduction to DMVs and how to utilize them, and another tool in your arsenal of understanding and performing your SQL environment. So I'm going to just leave it there, and then we'll continue with the other videos that discuss performance issues. So my name is Rafael, and this is how to become a production SQL database administrator. See you in the next video.